This is CBC Winnipeg News.
Good evening, and thank you for being with us tonight. We are just days into a 30-day pause on what could be the start of a trade war between the United States and Canada, as the clock counts down toward the potential imposition of U.S. tariffs on Canadian goods. Manitoba's government presented their latest economic response to the threat, advertising. CBC's Bartley Kivas has more on the Canoe government's Buy Manitoba campaign.
A round of boos during the Star-Spangled Banner before the Carolina Hurricanes played the Winnipeg Jets on Tuesday night. Some Manitobans are feeling less than neighborly about our neighbor to the south, even after U.S. President Donald Trump put off his punishing tariffs until early March. Today, Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew had some advice for hockey fans.
Don't boo the opposing team's national anthem, okay? Boo the opposing team when they touch the puck.
The Premier was asked how his government plans to diversify Manitoba export markets, something that'll take longer than a month to accomplish. He said the province is still trying to open a trade office in Washington, D.C., and is considering a second office somewhere else.
When we're talking about diversifying the markets that we reach, there's an active conversation about that next office. Is that going to be in the U.S. or is that going to be in South Korea? Maybe another location around the globe.
For now, Kinew's NDP government has a domestic audience in mind. Most of the NDP caucus launched a $140,000 ad campaign on Wednesday
2, 1.
to convince Manitobans to buy Manitoban goods. The money will be spent on billboard, radio, and digital ads. Kinew wouldn't say how much of the money would be spent on Manitoba media outlets versus the likes of Facebook and Instagram. Interim PC leader Wayne Owasco said that's a valid question.
How many thousands of dollars are going to Meta and Mark Zuckerberg?
The Kinew government also couldn't say whether their Buy Manitoba tote bags were made in Manitoba. A spokesperson for Kinew could only say the logo was printed in this province. Bartley Kivas, CBC News, Winnipeg.
So the announcement of that pause on tariffs was met with some relief from manufacturers and exporters here in Manitoba. But there are also questions about what could be looming when that 30-day pause is up. The CBC's Alana Cole has that story.
At the lumber zone in Steinbach, the calls keep coming.
Lots of customers reaching out, lots of my sales guys reaching out.
That's owner and president Joel Hartung. He's fielding questions about tariffs and how they'll impact the products people need.
I've said it a lot of times, but it's just the uncertainty with knowing what is going on and how we're supposed to handle stuff.
On Saturday, President Donald Trump announced a 25% tariff on most Canadian goods and a 10% tariff on Canadian energy products. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau responded with some counter tariffs. Then Monday, a pause for 30 days. Hartung says around 60% of his sales are Canadian manufactured products. Somewhere between 20 to 25% of sales come from U.S. products.
So if there were tariffs on both sides of the border, are you worried about what that could mean for the price of the siding that you're selling?
Yeah, yes.
That uncertainty is being felt across the country. Candice Lang heads the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. She was in Winnipeg talking about the economic relationship between Canada and the U.S.
We're waking up every day right now thinking about the Trump administration in the United States, but Americans don't wake up every day thinking about Canada.
She says reducing interprovincial trade barriers would be one measure to ease tariff impacts. A measure Hartung would like to see, an increase in manufacturing in Canada.
It's a good time to look within and see how we can recruit more manufacturing into Canada, or for Canadian business people to take that risk.
For now, he and his team are letting customers know tariffs could change their costs. Alana Cole, CBC News, Steinbach.
So U.S. President Donald Trump has claimed the tariffs were in response to concerns about border security, migrants, and illegal drugs flowing south. But we're learning more about a group of 6 migrants caught entering Manitoba from the United States. This is video here from a thermal imaging camera that the RCMP used to detect and arrest 6 people entering Canada east of Emerson last month. An RCMP plane equipped with thermal imaging was actively patrolling the border at the time that these people were spotted. They sent ground crews to pick up the 6 who police say were from Africa. They say none of the 6 were dressed for the weather, and the temperature at the time was around -20. The RCMP showed this video at a news conference in Edmonton, highlighting this incident and 2 others in Alberta. The president of the Canadian-Palestinian Association of Manitoba says he is in shock following U.S. President Donald Trump's recent statement about Gaza. Trump on Tuesday said he wants the U.S. to take control of the Gaza Strip, redevelop it, and move Palestinians elsewhere. He also said he's not ruling out sending the military to secure the territory. Trump made the comments in a news conference with Israel's Prime Minister. Ramzi Zeid says what happens in Gaza is not up to the U.S.
We ask for your help, and you want to give it, that's fine. But if we don't ask for it, we don't need it. We can rebuild it on our own. We don't need the help. We want to be left alone to live in peace, dignity, so that we can raise our families safely.
Zeid says the declaration by the U.S. is a violation of international law. The leaders of Manitoba's 2 largest health authorities have been replaced. It comes as the health minister says external financial and governance audits discovered systemic government failures. The CBC's Rosanna Hempel reports.
A breakdown in communication, a culture of dysfunction, and financial mismanagement. That's what Health Minister Uzoma Asseguera says the external financial and governance audits into most health authorities concluded.
Over and over again, health authorities are spending their resources on the wrong things. Spending on private agency staff instead of public nurses. Spending on bureaucracy instead of spending on the front lines.
The audits commissioned by the NDP government covered the 2019 to 2024 fiscal years for all health authorities except Southern Health. Most of them ran deficits most years, largely owing to higher salaries from new collective agreements, private staffing agencies, and the rising cost of medicine and supplies.
There is a disconnect between the message that our government has been saying and the decisions that healthcare leaders in some cases have been making.
Today's announcement included leadership changes at Shared Health and the Winnipeg Regional Health Authority. Asseguera says the decision to replace both CEOs, Lynette Siragusa and Mike Nader, came from the boards of directors. Nader declined to comment, and Siragusa could not be reached.
I suspect they're being scapegoated.
PC health critic Kathleen Cook argues today's announcement failed to commit to any of the recommendations in the reports and lay out a plan forward.
I suspect that the news release today is laying the groundwork for what could be some very unpopular decisions.
The audit reports make a number of recommendations, including that health authority budgets, contracts, and executive salaries may need government approval, and that health authorities adopt a new budgeting process that justifies each line of spending. It's unclear what the next steps are, but the province says it'll be about increasing accountability. Rosanna Hempel, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Manitoba is spending $800,000 on programs to help men reduce violence against women. Families Minister Nahani Fontaine announced the disbursement today. She says men are responsible for 90% of the violence against women and need support to end that violence. A large chunk of the funding is going to the Elmwood Community Resource Centre for its Inspiring Men and Boys program.
To learn about boundaries, communication, what is healthy, what is unhealthy masculinity. We are partnering with universities to go to recreational activity like sports and meeting men where they're at.
A total of 5 programs across Manitoba are receiving funding. The federal government is covering half the tab. Well, here's a look at a cloudy day in Winnipeg today. A few flurries, certainly not what we've seen elsewhere in the province with snow. Here's weather specialist Ethan Williams with the first check on our forecast.
Well, Riley, we have already been seeing snow moving through portions of southern Manitoba through the afternoon here on Wednesday, and specifically into western sections of the province. That's where some of that heavier snow has begun moving in, and it's in areas just to the west of Brandon, through the Parkland, through the Inner Lake, where we have snowfall warnings in place for a good 10 to 20 centimeters of snow that is likely going to be falling as we get into Wednesday night and throughout Thursday as well. Some pretty heavy amounts expected in some areas. For Winnipeg, I think we'll avoid the brunt of the snowfall. We're not under the warning, but with some snowfall at 8 a.m. and those winds gusting to 60 kilometers an hour through to the noon hour, we're definitely, I think, going to see some visibility challenges at times. That snow going to be blowing around. That should come to an end, though, as we get later into the afternoon with some clearing skies. The winds diminishing a bit, but it's going to make that feel closer to minus 20 at times, Riley.
Thanks, Ethan. Still ahead, lawyers for a Manitoba man accused of killing his neighbor say the Crown's case is based on assumption and speculation. More coming up next. The trial of a man accused of killing his neighbor in 2021 continued in Winnipeg today, with evidence from lawyers representing Eric Wildman. The CBC's Caitlin Gowerluck was in court.
Eric Wildman's lawyers spoke directly to the jurors hearing his first-degree murder trial on Wednesday, telling them the case against Wildman is based on nothing more than assumption and speculation. Wildman has pleaded not guilty to killing his neighbor, 40-year-old Clifford Joseph, in June 2021 in the village of Stead in eastern Manitoba. The accused sat silently next to his lawyers in court as they stressed to jurors hearing the trial that they hold Wildman's fate in their hands. Lawyer Martin Glazer told jurors Wildman is looking to them for justice. You are his safeguard against false accusations, he said, and you are his safeguard against injustice. Prosecutors allege Wildman killed Joseph when he caught him trying to steal from his property. They argue he hit the victim with his vehicle, then took the injured man to another location where he executed him. Jurors also heard from a collision reconstruction expert called by the defense. That expert testified he found nothing to conclusively show Wildman's vehicle had hit a person. He said the vehicle did have damage, but that it could have been from hitting an animal or being vandalized. The expert also said there were tire tracks on the property where prosecutors allege Wildman hit Joseph with his vehicle. But he saw nothing to tell him exactly what vehicle left them there or when. During cross-examination, prosecutors noted that expert didn't review all the evidence involved in the case, including testimony from the victim's girlfriend, who said she found some of Joseph's belongings lying between tire tracks on Wildman's property. Caitlin Gowerluck, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Meantime, in Brandon, 5 contractors entered guilty pleas today to conspiracy offenses. The men were accused of rigging bids to inflate the costs of Manitoba housing renovation projects. They now face tens of thousands of dollars in fines. The CBC's Kristen Annabel has more from Brandon's courthouse.
More than 2 years ago, 5 Brandon area men were charged with fraud under the Criminal Code and conspiracy offenses under the Competition Act. It was alleged they manipulated dozens of government contracts from 2011 to 2016. In court today, James Kauk, Guy Pringle, Doug Gunnarsson, Ryan Lamont, and Jeff Gregoire pleaded guilty to the Competition Act charges. Meanwhile, the fraud charges were dropped as part of the plea bargain. The men face fines ranging from $24,000 to $61,000. Lawyers for the group said that they regret their actions and take full responsibility for their involvement in the scheme. Court heard there were issues with the case that led to this plea deal. Crown Attorney Dan Manning said there were credibility issues with the key witness, challenges with some of the evidence, and an attempt to get the case tossed due to delays in laying charges.
Obviously, it took a while for the case to get to trial, but complicated matters take a lot of time to do that. There were some issues, but ultimately I think it was a fair sentence, and normally Crown would be seeking jail normally for these kind of offenses, but with some of the issues that we had, we came to a fair resolution.
Each defendant's fine varies based on the length of time they were involved in the scheme. They'll have 5 years to pay. Kristen Annabel, CBC News, Brandon.
Manitoba Liquor and Lotteries is asking the courts to block an offshore gambling website. The Crown Corporation says the site is breaking the law by operating in the province. And as the CBC's Arturo Chang reports, other gaming agencies are hoping this case sets a precedent.
The application in the Court of King's Bench names Bodog.eu and its sister free play site Bodog.net.
Bodog.eu lets users bet on sporting events and casino games like poker or blackjack. Manitoba Liquor and Lotteries says the companies running it are making false or misleading statements and illegally marketing to Manitobans. It wants the courts to block access to the sites. The Crown Corporation says Bodog's activities are diverting customers away from their own legal gambling site, and it's costing them significant revenue.
Manitoba Liquor and Lotteries is doing this on behalf of other gaming agencies. They're all part of a coalition formed a couple years back to crack down on illegal sites.
The coalition's executive director says the application is a first. They want to see how courts interpret this and use that to reinforce similar cases elsewhere in the country.
There's really 2 particular goals here. One, securing an injunction against an illegal operator within Manitoba, but two, validating the coalition's general position on illegal gambling more broadly.
The coalition says there are hundreds of sites just like Bodog, and that it's costing provinces money they could be using to fund things like social programs. One researcher who studies gambling says more people are doing it online since the pandemic.
The legal online gambling websites may have more regulations, they have more requirements that get in the way of excessive online gambling. And so some people may find these tools useful, and some people may find these tools may find that they get in the way of their online gambling.
We've reached out to Bodog, but have not heard back. Arturo Chang, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Well, as expected, we've started to see some snow falling here in the Red River Valley, but it's been a different story outside the city where we've seen some snow through the Parkland region throughout the day today. Ethan is back with another check on our forecast.
Well, Riley, that area of low pressure responsible for all this snowfall going to start to move through the province as we get into Wednesday evening and Thursday overnight. And again, heaviest amounts going to be falling through the inner lake there. For Winnipeg, we still could be seeing some light snow falling as we get into early Wednesday morning. For the commute, of course, I think there will still be some snow and definitely some blowing snow that we'll have to keep in mind. But slowly but surely, especially as we get into the afternoon hours, I think that's when we'll start to see the snow come to an end. Not only that, but we'll actually get some clearing conditions into the afternoon as well. Things definitely clearing out more substantially as we get into Friday and closer to the weekend as this area of high pressure begins to move in. But that's when we see a return to some colder temperatures staying below seasonal as we head through the rest of the work week. So again, highest amounts will be where the snowfall warnings are, up to 10 centimeters and possibly total amounts close to 20 if you're through the inner lake. And even through northwestern Ontario, we're seeing some higher amounts in the 10 to 15 centimeter range in places like Fort Frances and Red Lake. Winnipeg, I think at most, this is maybe closer to 5 centimeters. Same with places like Brandon and Portage as we get into Thursday. Winds have been a bit breezy at times as we've gone through Tuesday, but I think we'll begin to pick up, especially as we get through the day on Thursday. 40 to 50 kilometer an hour gusts, 60 if you're in Winnipeg and the Red River Valley, and especially along the Hudson Bay coast, we're still looking for breezy conditions. So that wind combined with that snow going to cause some lowered visibilities even as we get into early Thursday morning, finally getting some of that clearing through much of the province as we get into Thursday afternoon. Want to introduce you to Luna. Luna is 2 years old and she is up for adoption at the Flin Flon SPCA. So give them a call if you'd like to adopt Luna. And I think Luna up in Flin Flon not going to be dealing with a whole lot of the snow that we're seeing in the Winnipeg area, but yeah, I think she'll be trudging through a few snowflakes as we get into Thursday. But after that snowfall passes us by, the sky's clear and those temperatures slowly but steadily going to be dropping, with those overnight temperatures dropping into the minus 20s. And Riley, in the coming days here, we could be seeing some overnight lows near minus 30. I'll tell you all about that in your full 7-day forecast coming up.
I don't want to hear it, but we'll take it. All right, we have more to come after the break, including more puppies. Yes, I managed to find a way to fit more puppies in. More on that and more news ahead when we come back.
This is Manitoba. And this is Manitoba on your smart TV, because CBC News is now streaming local. Get local headlines, weather, and community notices, plus newscasts and live programming on your favorite connected device, all for free. It's called the CBC News Manitoba streaming channel. See your community on your connected TV and mobile devices. CBC News Manitoba, your local news streaming channel, now available.
The Prime Minister met with premiers today for the first time since Monday's tariff reprieve. They're working on preventing U.S. President Donald Trump from starting a trade war for good. But as Olivia Stefanovich explains, they're not the only ones pitching ideas.
Merci beaucoup. With the U.S. president keeping up the pressure, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is unveiling his own plan to tackle one of Donald Trump's biggest irritants.
We should crack down on drugs, not to please President Trump, but to ensure that not one more mother has to bury her face in her hands on learning that her son died of an overdose.
Poilievre is pitching mandatory life sentences for anyone convicted of selling 40 milligrams of fentanyl, enough to kill 20 people, and a 15-year sentence for traffickers found to be selling smaller quantities.
We will lock them up and we will throw away the key.
Everyone smiles. Poilievre isn't the only one making bold new promises as Trump's tariff threat lingers.
My government would work to reach 2% of GDP in defense spending by the end of this decade.
Liberal leadership candidate Mark Carney pledging to meet Canada's NATO defense spending commitment by 2030, 2 years earlier than the current plan, heavily criticized by Trump.
I will do whatever it takes to strengthen our economy and to protect Canadians.
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister held a 90-minute call with premiers, the first since Trump agreed to pause tariffs.
As long as Donald Trump is president, the risk of tariffs will never go away. This is a game to him. He wants to break Canada.
2, 1. One of the ways the federal and provincial governments are trying to make the country more resilient is by encouraging internal trade, which could boost the economy by $200 billion.
There's a real opportunity right now to build up the amount of dollars that we're spending in Canada by bringing down some of those barriers.
The Prime Minister will meet with business, public policy and labor leaders tomorrow for a new economic summit. The goal to protect Canada's economy from the whims of the U.S., its largest and increasingly erratic trading partner. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Ottawa.
There appears to be a newfound urgency and motivation to clear trade barriers within as Canada faces the threats from Donald Trump. Transport and Internal Trade Minister Anita Anand says she is seeing a willingness from the federal and provincial officials.
The willingness to reduce interprovincial barriers to trade and add up to $200 billion to the Canadian economy is palpable. And the provinces and territories are at the table with enthusiasm in a way that has not occurred over the past number of decades. And every minister at the table felt the need, as do I, as does our government, to act collectively, to seize the moment, and to do whatever we can to reduce those barriers to trade.
Now, as part of the deal with Donald Trump to delay U.S. tariffs, the Prime Minister committed to designating Mexican cartels as terrorist organizations. And while the scope of their influence in Canada is still unclear, there is evidence their reach is expanding in this country. The CBC's Thomas Dagg reports.
This is what police say Mexican drug cartels are slipping into Canada. $83 million worth of cocaine, destined for every corner of the country, and recently traced to a murderous cartel making inroads here.
They were prominent. I mean, if you look at what we have here right now, this is a large load.
In a new pledge, the Prime Minister announced Ottawa will list cartels as terrorists, just one of the efforts to ward off U.S. tariffs, as the Trump administration issues this fresh warning.
The Mexican drug cartels are rapidly expanding in Canada, and that's a danger.
Cartels are known to smuggle truckloads of drugs across the U.S. border and into Canada. But a recent bust in BC suggests they're also producing enough here to send abroad. At this super lab, police say the chemicals seized would have amounted to nearly 100 million doses of fentanyl.
The fact that they are here, I will say thriving, it is dangerous for sure.
Journalist Luis Nahara investigated the cartels in Mexico and fled to Canada. He sees their growing influence here, with criminal groups exploiting Pacific and Atlantic ports and laundering millions.
It has been significantly increasing, of course, because of the advantages that Canada offers.
But experts wonder what help will come now, with a trail of murders left behind, including the cartel-linked shooting of an innocent Indian couple in Ontario, still unresolved.
The benefit of designating the cartels is primarily a political one in terms of appeasing Trump and signaling to our American allies that we are willing to play ball.
The public safety minister insists the move will help authorities track the cartel's money and disrupt their operations once they're listed as terrorist groups alongside ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Thomas Dagg, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, tackling illegal fentanyl coming across the border is one thing, but experts say a true crackdown has to include targeting how drug groups move and hide their dirty money. And for Canada, that has been a long-standing weak spot. Nisha Patel reports.
The fentanyl coming through Canada is massive.
The U.S. president says if Canada doesn't crack down on drugs at the border, he'll invoke tariffs, crippling the economy. So the Prime Minister has promised to act, including cracking down on money laundering. According to a Canadian Police Intelligence Service, as much as $113 billion was laundered through Canada last year, much of it by the nearly 100 organized crime groups that produced fentanyl in this country.
Legislation has simply not kept up with the way this space has evolved over the last 25 years. It's just not been a priority for the government.
Experts say criminals are drawn to financial rules that are more lax compared to the U.S. There's less oversight, so they can more easily hide dirty money.
Even if you get caught, the penalties are relatively minor.
Even before Trump's threat, Ottawa proposed larger financial penalties for companies that don't follow anti-money laundering laws. This after TD Bank was fined $3 billion by American authorities for failing to stop fentanyl traffickers from laundering millions of dollars through its U.S. branches.
Banks, other financial institutions, securities dealers, jewelers, gold dealers, casinos. It's a huge problem in the sense of it's so pervasive and there are so many ways to do it.
Michael Ecclestone helps businesses monitor suspicious financial activity. He says there are big gaps in how Canada deals with money laundering compared to the U.S.
A lack of resources and a lack of focus is the amount of prosecution.
Canada has pledged to launch a joint strike force with the U.S. to combat money laundering. The federal government has also promised to create a financial crimes agency to boost enforcement, but that's almost 3 years overdue. Nisha Patel, CBC News, Toronto.
Overseas tonight, Donald Trump's radical proposal for the future of Gaza is being condemned by many around the world. The president suggested the United States could take over the Palestinian territory and relocate hundreds of thousands of Palestinians out of there. He even offered to help rebuild it into a place with facilities resembling the French or Italian Riviera. Chris Reyes has the details.
The fallout from President Donald Trump's comments on the future of the Gaza Strip has rippled across the globe, triggering anger and confusion, especially among Palestinians.
We have tried refuge before, we have tried displacement before, and it will not happen again. We have said it over and over, the Palestinian leadership, our president. people have made it very clear that we will not leave our land.
In Gaza, Trump's proposal to take over the Strip and relocate Palestinians in neighboring countries is being taken very seriously, but also met with resistance.
I do believe that Trump was the most courageous U.S. president who has previously taken bold decisions regarding the Middle East.
This is our country and we can't leave it in all circumstances.
At the White House briefing, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt was asked repeatedly to clarify what Trump meant when he said the U.S. would clear the land and take ownership of Gaza.
It's been made very clear to the president that the United States needs to be involved in this rebuilding effort to ensure stability in the region for all people. But that does not mean boots on the ground in Gaza. It does not mean American taxpayers will be funding this effort. It means Donald Trump, who is the best deal maker on the planet, is going to strike a deal with our partners in the region.
So far, those partners have publicly rejected Trump's plan, including Jordan and Egypt. Leavitt said the president is not fazed.
He has made it very clear, he's been very vocal, that he expects our partners in the region, particularly Egypt and Jordan, to accept Palestinian refugees temporarily so that we can rebuild their home.
According to the White House, President Trump has already spoken to the leaders of Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Bahrain, and will meet with the King of Jordan next week. Chris Reyes, CBC News, New York.
We'll bring you more on this story after the break on the U.S. president's plan to take over Gaza, triggering strong emotions from Palestinians. And we'll hear from a local expert. More on the fallout straight ahead. You are watching CBC Winnipeg News. Stay with us. The Israeli bombardment has left much of Gaza in ruins, but for millions of Palestinians, it is the only home they have. As Margaret Evans reports, U.S. President Donald Trump's stunning proposal to clear them out of the Gaza Strip is triggering strong emotions.
One of Gaza's impromptu graveyards, the dead buried hastily when bombs were falling. For many, there is still one more journey to make, home to the places they were forced from when they lived. Shireen Talaba has come for her brother Khalil and 2 cousins, all killed by Israeli fire, she says, in separate incidents. We have no one but our family, she says. We refuse to return home without them. It is just one scene of many as Gazans try to piece together what's left of their lives during a fragile ceasefire. News of Donald Trump's hopes to own Gaza and empty it of Palestinians has been met with fury, disdain, and despair.
He will come now with his all the plan to evacuate not just Gaza Strip, to all Palestine.
During his first presidency, Donald Trump broke with convention by recognizing Jerusalem as the Israeli capital and moving the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, despite Palestinian hopes of a state with occupied East Jerusalem as its capital. Trump's latest proposal on Gaza is widely seen as a gift to hard-line Jewish nationalists who want to resettle Gaza themselves and annex the occupied West Bank. Now, with God's help, we work to permanently bury the dangerous idea of a Palestinian state, says Bezalel Smotrich, Israel's finance minister. Some Gazans fear that Egypt and Jordan's refusal to take in Gaza's population won't hold.
Eventually, they will agree to move the Gaza people from Gaza.
Others say nothing will uproot them.
Trump cannot do anything here because in front of him there is a great people called Palestinian people.
Every day, Gazans are still returning to the homes they had to leave behind. Some, like Shireen Talaba, to bury their dead for a second time. Margaret Evans, CBC News, London.
So many are wondering how realistic Trump's proposal actually is. Let's dig a little bit deeper into that tonight. Nathan DeRaco is the Morrow Chair in Human Rights and Social Justice and Assistant Professor of Law at the University of Manitoba. He spoke with Faith Fundal on Up to Speed. Faith started the interview by asking if the U.S. taking over Gaza is possible.
Politically, perhaps possible, but lawfully, it's unlawful categorically. When President Trump talks about owning or taking over and owning Gaza, in legal terms, under international law, we're talking about the annexation of territory or the acquisition of territory by force or straight up colonization, all of which are categorically prohibited by the United Nations Charter, some of the bedrock principles of the United Nations Charter, which is effectively the global constitution and regulates the relationships between all 194 member states in the international community.
How would you characterize what impact a statement like that has?
Yeah, I think that, I was living in a different country at the first round of the Trump presidency, and so I was a bit removed from it. But here, there seems to be, there's the one point of that everyone making a joke, we got 4 years of this circus, how is it going to play out? But you're right that there are very serious real-world implications for millions of people, not only in the United States and Canada, but around the world for the actions of what the United States and what Trump's policies are doing, whether it's LGBTQ rights or trans rights or refugees or migrants or Palestinians in Gaza. So it's very, very serious. And this is why I think Canada needs to stand up and take its obligations very seriously and make emphatically clear that in no way is such an absurd political statement any type of possibility that Canada will support or will in any way be involved with, including Canadian companies, Canadian businesses, anything, right? So I think we're at a precipice. And one of the other challenges is there seems to be a lot of interest in attaching to what Trump says, right? I've gotten multiple calls from media organizations or academics, what about Trump? What about Trump? What about Trump? But all of these laws I've talked about, whether the UN Charter or human rights law or the law of war, have also been systematically violated for the last 15 months. And the obligations of Canada are the same. So I really think that there's a double standard that's going on, and the global north or the west is just simply not fulfilling its obligations and its commitment to Palestinians or the rights of Palestinians. And I think it's really weakening the entire system of the rules-based order that emerges after World War II and the adoption of the UN Charter and the whole international human rights law project, because it's rules for powerful states only when they benefit their geopolitical and military interests.
So break this down for us. If there was one action that would that you would see demonstrate Canada's commitment to all of those things, what would you want Canada to do immediately?
Immediately, I think it needs to come out strong opposition of any proposal to relocate 2 million Gazans from the Gaza Strip. Second, it would impose a two-way arms embargo against Israel and take its obligations of the threat of the plausible cause of genocide in Gaza and its obligations under international humanitarian law to respect and ensure respect that others are respecting. And diplomatic sanctions, make sure that charities aren't working in the occupied Palestinian territory. There's a broad range. From the International Court of Justice just said that Israel's occupation of Palestinian land is existentially unlawful, which means that all activities that occur within it are also unlawful. Canada has Canadian-based corporations are operating in the occupied Palestinian territories. Canadian charities are operating in the Palestinian territories. Canadians are serving in the IDF and coming back to Canada. There's a whole broad range of social, political, economic, and legal measures necessary to implement the International Court of Justice ruling, which is going now back to the International Court of Justice to clarify what states actually need to do to implement it.
Am I right in hearing frustration in your voice? How confident are you that that will actually happen?
Well, it takes political will. And I know the political will is there, because if I compare Canada's response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine versus Canada's response to the war and genocide in Gaza, they're two diametrically opposed political and legal responses. And that shows the double standards and hypocrisy of the implementation of international law, and it weakens the entire set of laws.
All right, let's shift gears and get another look at our Manitoba weather forecast. Here is weather specialist Ethan Williams.
Well, temperatures, despite this system moving in and bringing us all this snow, not really warming up all that much. We're still kind of hanging at or even a bit below seasonal conditions through much of Manitoba. And part of the reason for that is usually when we get these systems moving from out west, they give us a nice boost of Pacific air. But out west, along the west coast of Canada, they've been dealing with some below seasonal conditions themselves. So they're not giving us that nice warmth that we normally get temperature-wise with these systems. And unfortunately, our jet stream pattern, well, there's not going to be too much beveling in the jet stream, no major ridges or troughs, but it is still going to be to our south generally over these next few days. And you can see these kind of lighter blues and the white colors that are moving in. And these do represent temperatures that will be down into the -20s and perhaps near -30 overnight, even into southern Manitoba. As we get over these next few days here, and especially through the north, I think that's where we're going to be seeing some colder conditions. For tonight, overnight, as we get into Thursday, for southern Manitoba, as this system moves in, I think we're generally looking for lows between -15 and -20. And again, most areas expecting snow moving through, especially where we have those snowfall warnings in place through the inner lake and through the parkland. Again, a good 10 to 15 centimeters probably as we get into overnight and through Thursday morning, an additional 5 centimeters into Thursday afternoon. For northern Manitoba, again, you're mostly escaping the brunt of the snow. Temperatures, though, actually going to remain above seasonal overnight. Again, this is probably the last night for a little while that we'll see temperatures kind of in these above seasonal ranges here. That is thanks to cloud cover, which will be in place largely through the day. Thursday, we'll begin to see some clearing in far northern sections as those temperatures drop back down into the minus 20s into northern Manitoba. For southern Manitoba, again, by the commute on Thursday morning, much of this snow has pushed its way eastward. Again, the Winnipeg area, I think we are still going to be seeing some snow and blowing snow. Winds going to be quite gusty even as we get into the afternoon. But you can see skies begin to clear out west, and that'll eventually reach the Red River Valley as we get later into the afternoon. So there will, Riley, be some clearing skies likely by the end of the day Thursday.
All right. Thank you, Ethan. All right. Well, it's not the dog walking forecast, but it just might be the next best thing. We'll take you to the Super Bowl for dogs when we come back. We are back right after this. Stay with us.
This is Manitoba. And this is Manitoba on your smart TV, because CBC News is now streaming local. Get local headlines, weather, and community notices, plus newscasts and live programming on your favorite connected device, all for free. It's called the CBC News Manitoba streaming channel. See your community on your connected TV and mobile devices. CBC News Manitoba, your local news streaming channel, now available.
Well, if you applied for a new plastic health card, you might get it in the mail as early as this month. The province says about 190,000 people have asked for the new health card so far. It expects the plastic cards to get mailed out in early February, and a digital health card will also be available soon. As for your paper health card, the health minister said last month that they will continue to be accepted at provincial healthcare facilities.
Well, after our windy and snowy day Thursday, skies will clear out for Friday and Saturday. But this is where our temperatures begin to drop as we head into the weekend. And temperatures overnight, as you can see there, dropping into the mid-20s. Sunday, I think, is when we'll see kind of our next round of cloud cover. Not expecting much moisture moving in, but definitely cloudier skies. And then as things clear out for Monday, that's where temperatures begin to drop once again, around -20 for Monday with mostly sunny conditions, overnight lows near -30. And yes, even during the day there, Riley, feeling into the -30s for the start of next week.
Thanks, Ethan. So get ready for the fur to fly, and I'm not talking about the wind we're expecting tomorrow. Puppy Bowl 21 returns to the airwaves this Sunday. The much anticipated and oh so adorable event ahead of the Super Bowl is our Daily Lift. Have a look at this. Over 140 rescue pooches from shelters across the U.S. are set to compete in the annual Super Bowl for dogs. Team Fluff and Team Ruff will battle it out on the field to take home the Lombardi Trophy. This year's competition also showcases special needs dogs for the first time. The most valuable pup and underdog prizes will also be awarded. Organizers say Puppy Bowl's main mission is to encourage pet adoption so animals can find forever homes. And that's what Brittany missed tonight. Don't worry, I'm sure we'll have a kitten bowl coming up later in the week as well. Maybe. We'll see. Thank you for being with us tonight. We'll see you again tomorrow. Have a good one.